I've always been the odd one in my own family. While my brother Brian got applause just for keeping a job for over a month, I built my career in finance from scratch. At 32, I own my own house, travel whenever I want, and until recently, sent money every month to my parents and siblings. It's not like they needed it. It just became an unspoken obligation. During Christmas dinner at my parents' house, Mom was serving the turkey while Brian was talking about his latest business idea. Amanda, my sister, was discreetly rolling her eyes as my dad, William, agreed with everything Brian said. Jessica could help with a starter investment, Mom suggested, as if I weren't there. "You're sending the money for this month, right?" Brian asked, interrupting my attempt to explain why his plan wouldn't work. "I need to pay some bills." Amanda sighed while straightening up the ornaments on the tree. "Lucky you, that money isn't a problem. Not everyone's that lucky." "It wasn't luck," I replied. "I worked hard to get here." "Here she goes bragging again," Amanda muttered to Brian, loud enough for me to hear. My dad cleared his throat, suggesting a toast to avoid any confrontation, as he always did. No one asked about my job or my life. At that Christmas table, I was just a checkbook. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. "I'm excited for tomorrow," I said, as I helped Mom with the dishes after dinner. "What time does the family reunion lunch at Grandma's start?" The sudden silence was deafening. Mom and Amanda exchanged quick looks. Brian stopped fiddling with his phone. "Sweetheart, the reunion was yesterday," Mom said, without looking me in the eyes. My fingers froze on the edge of the plate I was drying. "Yesterday? But I thought it was—" "We changed the date last week," Mom quickly explained. "I thought I had told you." Amanda grabbed her phone. "Look how fun it was. Everyone was there." She showed me the photos. Uncles, cousins, my parents, Brian and herself, all wearing party hats and smiling around a big table at Grandma's house, with the birthday cake I had ordered for the occasion. "You ordered the wrong cake," Brian said as he helped himself to another slice of the Christmas dessert. "They sent a chocolate one, but Grandma wanted vanilla. I had to rush to the bakery to fix it." I tried to process that information. The cake I had specifically ordered was supposed to be vanilla with strawberry icing, exactly how Grandma likes it. The cake I had already paid for in advance. "It was a mistake," Mom insisted when she saw my expression. "With so many end-of-year events, we ended up mixing up the dates." "That's so weird," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Especially because I confirmed with every one of you on Tuesday, via text." "Ah, you know how these end-of-year parties are," Dad said, finally joining the conversation. "Mix-ups happen. And why did no one call me when they noticed I wasn't there?" Amanda shrugged while adjusting the Christmas tree lights. "We thought you were busy with work, as always." "By the way," Brian interrupted, "I already bought the new sneakers with the money you sent me this month. Jordan edition, limited. They cost more than usual, so I'm gonna need a little extra." I stared at him. I hadn't sent any money yet. He just assumed he could count on it. "Sneakers," I repeated slowly. "Yeah, they're awesome. I can show you." Meanwhile, I got excluded from a family reunion. "That wasn't it," Mom protested, clearing away the Christmas dinner leftovers. "Then explain to me how all of you forgot to let me know the date had changed. How come no one found it strange that I, who paid for the cake, wasn't there?" The silence that followed said it all. The guilty looks, the dodged eyes, the way Mom suddenly got interested in the Christmas dishes. "I get it," I said, placing the dish towel on the decorated table. "I'm not sending you money anymore." It was like I had announced the end of the world. Mom dropped a plate, which luckily didn't break. "What?" Brian exclaimed. "You can't do that." "I can and I will. The money is mine. I earn it with my work and I decide how to use it." "Jessica, you're being dramatic," Mom said. "It was just a misunderstanding about the date. We all know it wasn't. And I think it's time to rethink my relationship with this family." Amanda let out a forced laugh, playing with the presents under the tree. "Here she comes, talking about my money, always rubbing it in our faces." "I never rubbed anything in your faces. On the contrary, I've always helped out without expecting any thanks. But there's a difference between helping and being taken advantage of." "Sweetheart," Dad began, raising his wine glass, "you don't need to make rash decisions, especially at Christmas. It isn't rash. I'm tired of being treated like an ATM. If that's all I represent to you, then there's no reason to continue. I went home feeling strangely lighter. On the way, I turned off the notifications from the family group chat. I needed space to think. Barely home, my phone started buzzing non-stop. First, messages from Brian. Need that money. I already bought the sneakers. Jessica, this isn't funny. I have bills to pay. You can't just stop. Then messages from Amanda. Congrats on making Mom cry at Christmas. I hope you're happy. We always knew you thought you were better than us. After that, Mom messaged, Sweetheart, let's talk. Don't make decisions when you're upset. Brian really needs that help this month. More messages kept coming throughout the night. Brian revealed that besides the sneakers, he had bought a new TV, a PS5, and a laptop, all counting on the money I would usually send. He was panicking. Around 11 at night, I got a call from my dad. Something rare. Jessica, your mom is very upset. Brian made some purchases counting on your help. That's not my problem, Dad. He already spent the money on expensive sneakers and games. Well, yeah, but it's not my responsibility to cover his expenses. I never promised endless money for anyone. The days after Christmas turned into an avalanche of desperate attempts by my family to make me change my mind. The messages were constant, switching between guilt, anger, and pleas. How can you do this during the holidays? Mom wrote. Do you not think about how it affects all of us? Brian is desperate. I didn't reply. On New Year's Eve, while I was preparing a simple dinner for myself, my phone rang. It was Amanda. You can't just ignore your family forever, she said as soon as I answered. Mom hasn't stopped crying. I'm not ignoring. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries? You're punishing everyone because you got jealous over one reunion. It's not jealousy, Amanda. It's about respect. You deliberately excluded me and then expected me to keep footing Brian's bills. She took a deep breath. Look, I know what happened wasn't cool, but you don't have to cut off the money because of it. Brian is really in a tight spot. The money he spent on sneakers, video games, and a new TV, you mean. People make mistakes, Jessica. Not everyone is as perfect and disciplined as you. It's not about perfection. It's about owning the consequences of one's choices. Easy for you to say when you have money. I have money because I work hard and don't splurge impulsively. Brian could do the same. She switched tactics. Mom isn't well health-wise. All this drama is only making her stress worse. I felt a pang of guilt but kept my stance. I'm sorry she's going through that, but I can't be responsible for everyone's emotional well-being. Is that really how you see your family? As a burden? No, Amanda. It's how you all see me. As a bank. The next day, I received an email from Brian with the subject, urgent. It was a list of every bill he needed to pay and a detailed explanation of how he'd be on the street if I didn't help. At the end, there was a bank account number and the exact amount, 3 times what I normally sent. My dad also tried. He called me at work, something he never did. Jessica, I know you're hurt, but please consider what you're doing. Your mom is devastated. Dad, why is no one questioning Brian's behavior? Why am I always the one who has to cave? You know how he is. He's always been more sensitive. Being sensitive doesn't justify spending money he doesn't have and then pressuring me. He's your brother, and that automatically makes me responsible for his finances for the rest of my life. Silence on the other end. Dad, why was I excluded from that family reunion? More silence. Then, it was your mom's idea. She said you'd probably be too busy with work. She didn't even ask me. No one did. It's complicated, honey. You know how your mom gets when it's about you. She always thought you didn't value the family enough. Not valuing? I've literally supported you all for years. It's not about the money, but when the money stops, suddenly it's a family emergency. He didn't know how to respond. 3 weeks later, on a rainy Friday, the doorbell at my place rang insistently. Through the peephole, I saw Brian, soaked and looking furious. I hesitated, but eventually opened the door. What are you doing here, Brian? He came in uninvited, dripping water all over my doormat. You're not answering my calls, not responding to my messages. What am I supposed to do? Respect my space. That would be a good start. Space? You're ruining my life. He paced back and forth in my living room. The bank's threatening to repossess my car. I've missed 3 credit card payments. My phone's going to get cut off next week. Brian, you have a job. How are you so deep in debt? None of your business how I spend my money. Exactly. Just like it's none of your business how I spend mine. He stopped and glared at me with half-closed eyes. You've always been like this, haven't you? Always thinking only of yourself. How did you come to that conclusion? Look at you, a house, a new car, trips to Europe. Meanwhile, the rest of the family can barely pay their bills. Because you all spend more than you earn, Brian. I saved for years to buy this house. I worked 50 hours a week. I didn't take a vacation for 3 years in a row just to save money. And now you think you're better than everyone. I never said that. You don't have to say it. He gestured around. All of this speaks for itself. Your lifestyle is a slap in the face to the family. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Brian, you didn't come here to discuss philosophy. What do you want? I want you to stop being selfish and help your family. I helped out for years, and as thanks, I was deliberately excluded from a family reunion. Still on that? It was just a stupid meeting. If it was so stupid, why did no one want to include me? He looked away. You think you're that important? Amanda and Mom can't stand hearing about your job, your achievements, your perfect life. That stung more than I expected. I rarely talk about it. You don't have to say anything. You exist, and that's enough to remind us of what we don't have. So the solution was to exclude me and keep taking my money? You never complained before, because I thought I was helping people who loved me, not financing people who resent me. Brian ran his wet hands through his hair, visibly frustrated. You don't understand. It's not about resentment. Then explain it to me, Brian, because it sure looks like that. Well, you left. You built your life away from us. You don't need anyone anymore. And that's bad. It's when you make everyone feel like a failure. I never treated you like that. You didn't have to. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. You're pathetic, you know. You think you can buy respect with your money. Those words hit me like a punch. I think you should leave now. Not until we sort this out. There's nothing to sort out. I'm not sending any more money, and you need to accept that. You can't just cut your family off from your life. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm cutting the financial support. There's a big difference. He stepped toward me, invading my personal space. You'll regret this. I held my ground. Are you threatening me in my own home? I'm saying that families support each other. If you abandon us when we need you, one day you'll realize the mistake you made. Brian, go away before I call the police. He stared at me for a long moment with an expression I'd never seen before. Then abruptly he walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned one last time. You think you're so special with your money and your success, but in the end, you'll end up alone, and we'll move on without you. The door slammed hard behind him, leaving a heavy silence in the house. I stood in the middle of the living room trembling, not from fear, but from a strange mix of anger and relief. After Brian left, I sat on the couch and cried for the first time since Christmas, not out of regret, but from the relief of finally seeing clearly the toxic dynamic that had been fueling us for years. The phone rang again. It was Mom. Brian just got home. Completely distraught, she said without any greeting. What did you say to him? Me? He showed up at my place making thinly veiled threats and insulting me. He's going through a tough time, Jessica. We all are. The difference is in how we handle it. He's your brother. Family helps family. And where was that family feeling when you deliberately excluded me from Grandma's reunion? She hesitated. It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't, and we both know it. Brian just confirmed it. You didn't want me there. You've always been difficult, Jessica. Always wanting to be different. Different how? By working hard? By being financially responsible? Always acting superior. It was like a veil had been lifted. All my life trying to prove my worth, sending money, helping out in emergencies, and deep down, they saw me as arrogant for simply having built a stable life. Mom, let me be very clear. I'm not sending you money anymore. It's non-negotiable. And what about Brian? His bills, his car. He's an adult. He'll figure it out. How can you be so cold? I'm not being cold. I'm practicing self-respect. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end. Is that your final word? It is. Then I guess we have nothing else to talk about. The finality in her voice should have hurt me, but instead, I felt only peace. All right, Mom, if that's how you see it. I hung up and then sent a message to the family group. I want to make it clear, I won't send any more money, not out of revenge or anger. It's because I realized that this dynamic isn't healthy for any of us. I'm open to rebuilding our relationships on more balanced terms, with no financial transactions involved. The choice is yours. I clicked send and, as a final gesture, blocked the group notifications. I needed space to process everything. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. I woke up feeling different, lighter, clearer, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted. At work, my boss noticed the change. "You seem different today," she commented during our weekly meeting. I made some important decisions in my personal life. Apparently they turned out well. I smiled. They had to. In the following days, I reorganized my finances. The money I used to send to my family would now go to an investment account. I also signed up for a photography course I'd always wanted to take, but never prioritized. It felt strange to have that kind of freedom, not just financially, but emotionally. I realized how much of my energy was spent trying to please people who, deep down, didn't want to be pleased. They just wanted to be supported. 3 weeks went by with no contact from my family. At first, I checked my phone compulsively, expecting an avalanche of accusatory messages or missed calls, but there was only silence. Gradually, I began to fill that space with other things. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I started going to a book club on Saturdays, a day I previously reserved exclusively for family visits. I began the photography course and discovered a talent I never knew I had. The instructor, a middle-aged woman named Eleanor, commented about one of my photos. "You have a unique eye. You can see beauty in angles most people ignore." That simple compliment meant more to me than any recognition I'd ever received from my family. In one of the classes, a classmate invited me for coffee. During our conversation, I briefly mentioned my family situation. "You know," he said, "I went through something similar with my brother. He expected me to fund his business forever, even after 3 consecutive failures. And how did you handle it?" I set boundaries. It was tough at first. He didn't speak to me for almost a year, but eventually our relationship rebuilt on healthier terms. "Do you think that's possible with any family?" He shrugged. "Depends. Some people only want to get what they can from you. Others are capable of looking past that and valuing who you are, not what you can give." His words echoed in my mind for days. I started reflecting on the kinds of relationships I wanted to nurture from now on. The silence from my family continued. 1 month turned into 2. The absence of family drama created a calm I'd never experienced before. I stopped feeling guilty about every purchase I made for myself. I began planning a solo trip I'd always dreamed of, but always postponed because money kept going to Brian's emergencies. At work, I received a promotion. The tranquility in my personal life translated into greater productivity and creativity. My boss remarked that I seemed more present in meetings, more confident in my presentations. One sunny Sunday, while organizing my apartment, I found an old box with family photos. I sat on the floor and spent hours looking at them one by one. There were genuine moments of happiness, birthdays, graduations, vacations. But I also noticed something I'd never really seen before. In almost every group photo, I was slightly separated from everyone else, as if even though I was physically there, I was already considered an outsider. I didn't feel bitterness at noticing that. Rather, I felt a deeper understanding. Maybe I'd always been different, not better or worse, just different. And maybe there was nothing wrong with that. That night, before going to sleep, I looked at my phone. Still no messages from them. Surprisingly, I realized that everything was okay. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely for myself, without the weight of family expectations or financial obligations. Boundaries aren't walls, I remembered my therapist saying. someone I'd started seeing regularly. They're doors that you choose when to open. I fell asleep with that thought, feeling not only at peace, but genuinely curious about what the future might hold. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this. Almost 3 months after the confrontation with Brian, on an ordinary Tuesday, I received a message from him. "Need your help, Jess. It's urgent, please." I stared at those words for a long time, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, the mix of guilt and duty that always pushed me to act. My finger hovered over the screen, ready to ask what the emergency was this time. Then I stopped. I took a deep breath, and I simply deleted the message. It wasn't an act of cruelty or revenge. It was an act of self-love. Brian hadn't even asked how I was doing. He didn't try to rebuild our relationship. He didn't acknowledge his problematic behavior. It was just another attempt to milk me for money. I put my phone aside and continued preparing my dinner, a fancy dish I'd learned to cook in my new cooking classes. As I chopped the vegetables with precision, I realized I no longer felt guilty, not anxious, not that desperate need to check if he'd sent more messages. It was liberating. In the following week, I received an email from Mom. Unlike the previous messages, this one didn't mention money or emergencies. "Jessica, I hope you're well. Your dad and I are adjusting our finances. It's not easy, but we're managing. Brian found a more stable job at a dealership. Amanda is getting married next summer. I know our last conversation didn't end well, but you're our daughter and you'll always have a place here if you want it." It was the closest to recognition I would get. There were no apologies for excluding me from the reunion at Grandma's, nor any mention of Brian's behavior, just a factual update and a slightly open door. I replied briefly, "Thanks for the update. I'm glad you're managing. I'm doing well. I got a promotion at work and started some new activities. Say hi to Dad for me." I didn't promise visits or a return to regular contact, but I didn't slam the door completely either. It was a beginning. 2 months later, I received an invitation to Amanda's wedding. The card had a handwritten note. "It would mean a lot to have you there. No pressure, no expectations. Amanda." I decided to go. Not out of obligation, but by choice. I bought a modest gift within what I felt comfortable giving. On the day, I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to feel confident. The ceremony was simple and lovely. I kept a polite distance from the family, exchanging cordial greetings but avoiding lengthy conversations. Brian barely spoke to me, just giving a nod. Mom tried a few approaches about how tough things were, but I deftly changed the subject. During the reception, Dad briefly sat next to me. "You look good, Jessica." "I'm well, Dad. Your mom and I," he hesitated. "We're learning to live on our own resources. It's not easy at our age, but we're managing." "I'm happy to hear that. Brian is different too. More responsible, I'd say." I nodded without commenting. "I won't say it was all good when you stopped helping," he continued. "It was hard, but maybe it was necessary." It was the closest to validation I'd ever received from him. "Thanks for saying that, Dad." At the end of the party, as I was getting ready to leave, Amanda came up to me. "Thanks for coming," she said. "It really meant a lot." "It was a beautiful ceremony," I replied honestly. "Jessica, She seemed to search for words. "I'm really sorry for what happened. You know, the family reunion and all that drama. It's all okay. It turned out to be the best thing for everyone in the end. Do you think maybe someday we can, I don't know, try again? As a family?" I looked at her, seeing past the defensive facade she always maintained. There was genuine vulnerability there. "Maybe," I replied, "but it would have to be different. It would need to be different." She nodded, understanding. Driving home that night, I reflected on how much my life had changed over the past few months. Besides the promotion at work, I had developed new interests, made new friends, and even started a small side photography project that was beginning to pay off. The most important realization: I had learned to live without that constant sense of obligation, guilt, and indebtedness. I had learned that setting boundaries didn't mean cutting people out. It meant building healthier, more genuine relationships. When I got home, I received a notification on my phone. Brian had sent me another message. "About that day at your house, I said some horrible things. I was angry and scared. Not that it's an excuse. I just want you to know I didn't mean it." I didn't reply immediately, not out of bitterness, but because I wanted to reflect on what those words really meant. Was it an apology or an attempt to reopen the door for future money requests? The next day, I simply replied, "Thanks for the message, Brian." That was it. I didn't offer any financial help, nor did I promise to go back to how things were. I just acknowledged his attempt at communication. Our family would never be the same as before, and that was for the best. That old dynamic was toxic and one-sided. If we ever rebuilt our relationships, they'd have to be based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. As I was sorting through my photos from Amanda's wedding in a new album, I smiled to myself. For the first time in my adult life, I was living entirely by my own terms. It wasn't selfish, as Brian had accused me. It was self-determination. It was freedom. And that freedom, free from emotional manipulation, free from forced obligations, free from guilt, was something no amount of money could ever buy. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get access to more stories like this.